So you've got this book that you've been working on coming out next year, I believe, "The Myth of Normal: Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture."
Yeah.
I have a feeling we're getting some little previews from the content of that book. I just wanted to talk about that you've been quite critical, on record and even in our conversation about sort of mainstream medicine's approach to trauma and addiction. And then, the title of the book just going so far as to just, name the craziness of our own, like the way we live, at least here in the West or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe you can just speak to what your main concerns are about the way, in a mainstream way, we think about and talk about trauma and addiction, and what you're advocating for and where we should be going with all of this.
So first of all, trauma goes way beyond addiction.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm actually saying, based on voluminous scientific evidence, let alone human insight, is that most chronic illness, whether physical, so-called, or mental, so-called, is rooted in trauma. In fact, everything we call, the British psychologist Richard Bentall writes that the evidence relating psychosis, for example, to childhood adversity is stronger, or is about as strong at least, as the evidence linking cigarettes and lung cancer or lung disease. So it's not like we lack the evidence. So my knock on, now that's only when it comes to, say, mental illness, but all mental illnesses are response, in my view, and adaptive responses in some sense to, at least they begin that way, to childhood adversity and trauma, as are most chronic illnesses, as I show in my book, When the Body Says No. So Canadian study, men who are sexually abused, they have something like, and I'm trying to remember the study, do they have 50% more chance or double the risk of cancer as adults? Something like that. But certainly elevated risk of cancer. This is regardless of lifestyle factors, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
smoking or drinking. A study out of Harvard 2 years ago, women with post-traumatic stress disorder, severe post-traumatic stress disorder, double the risk of ovarian cancer. Now, if that was the only study ever done, and it isn't, and it's all been shown in animal models that stress and trauma increase the risk of ovarian cancer. But if that was the only study ever done, that should send every physician running to figure out what's the connection between emotions and malignancy. And this information has been coming in for decades and decades and decades. So whether you're talking about autoimmune disease or you're talking about malignancy, that has a huge traumatic imprint every time. Now, Western medicine separates the mind from the body. Oh, by the way, the ovarian study, the ovarian cancer study, the milder the symptoms of PTSD, the less the likelihood of cancer.
Wow.
Which means that if we help people deal with their traumas, we could potentially prevent malignancy. Now, there's all kinds of physiological reasons for that, and the physiological pathways have actually been worked out. Mm-hmm. None of this is a mystery. Mm-hmm. But for all that science, the average medical student never hears this stuff. At least until recently, it's changing a little bit. The average student does not get a single lecture on trauma. They should get a whole year-long course on trauma. Mm-hmm. They don't get a single lecture, except physical trauma, like, broken bones and so on. So the Western medicine separates the mind from the body, the emotions from the physiology, which scientifically is, what's the word, non-tenable. In real life, it doesn't exist. I mean, let me induce any emotion in you and see if it doesn't have a physiological correlate in your body right away. Mm-hmm. Whether you're happy, relaxed, or terrified or angry, they all have physiological imprints. They all involve your nervous system, your cardiovascular system, your gut, your immune system, your hormonal apparatus. It's all one system. Western medicine does not take that unity into account. either in its understanding of the etiology of illness, the causation of illness, and certainly not when it comes to the treatment of it. Number one, Western medicine separates for the individual from the environment. So, for example, addiction is seen as an individual problem. It's not. It's a multi-generational family problem. It's also a social problem. If you look at today with the hollowing out of the industrial economy in the United States, under neoliberalism, the fraying of the social net, the social safety net, you get massive dislocation, massive despair, and you get massive increases in addiction. You can't separate the individual from the environment. That ovarian cancer PTSD study, nobody develops PTSD on their own. That happens in an environment. Mm-hmm. So that the cancer showing up in the individual female body is a manifestation of a social process. Mm-hmm. And so that's not understood. What's also not understood by Western medicine is the body's and the psyche's own healing capacity. So we're all about cure, mm-hmm. if it's possible, or symptom suppression. For example, in chronic mental health conditions and chronic autoimmune conditions, all we do is we suppress symptoms. But that the psyche or the soma, the soul or the body, has an innate healing capacity that can be encouraged and invited and supported, that's not considered in Western medical training or the Western medical ideology. So those are significant gaps which really limit as amazing as Western medicine can be, and one gasps at the miracles that they can perform. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's so much more limited than it could be. Mm-hmm. And the miracles are largely in the realm of acute conditions. We're really quite illiterate when it comes to the long-term chronic conditions of mind and the body.
Hey, thanks for checking out that clip of the Mindspace podcast. You can get the full episode here on YouTube or check it out on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks, and be well.